This is a sabbatical poem called City Sky. Looking up at the half-dark sky, seeing only the brightest of stars, there's a sense of loss so sharp I can close my eyes. Tell myself they are still there behind the artificial light that turns me blind. Far in the distance, someone sets off fireworks, bright colors, wild motion, loud noises. They seem garish, like a toddler putting on mother's makeup. Our powders and chemicals will never, could never match the glory of the desert sky at night. I remember the delicate shades of the Milky Way still there, the illusion of thickness, weight, and density still there, the song that rang out just beyond my capacity to hear, please God, always there. I want to wrap these memories around me like an Afghan or a second skin, a robe made of star stuff, just like me. In the silence, may we rest in the embrace of the universe, feeling the day-blind stars above us and the ancient star stuff within. My colleague in Seattle at University Church, the Reverend Dr. John Luopa, tells this story. He is part of a clergy group of clergy in Seattle, and in that gathering, a Catholic priest was sharing his life odyssey. And the story he told was one of failure. He'd come of age during the heady days of Vatican II when he and other liberal young priests were full of hope and optimism about the changes in the church. They believed the tradition they loved was finally evolving into a faith that would feel alive, relevant, and vibrant. He shared his deep disappointment that the transformation hadn't happened, and that if anything, the church had hardened and become more conservative than ever. This man was quite well respected and loved by his colleagues, and they were surprised and even a little hurt to learn that he felt like most of his life had been a failure. As was the practice, colleagues had the opportunity afterwards to ask questions. One person asked this priest how, given his disappointment and grief and brokenheartedness, how was he yet able to do such good work? Feeling himself a failure, how could he seem so peaceful and content? The priest answered simply, I know whose I am. I know whose I am. His response touched something deep and tender in my colleague John, and it touches a similar place in me. Modern Unitarian Universalists no longer owe any particular loyalty to any prophet or Messiah. We let go of our historical Christian roots in order to embrace the human potential for all to be prophets and all to be teachers. In doing so, though, have we become spiritual orphans? Or is there something deeper and broader that undergirds our faith? What have we lost in letting go of the need for a unified theology? And what have we gained? Whose now are we? In this, as in every question we ponder, I want to reiterate that my answers are just my answers, and you are welcome to agree, disagree, argue, reject, ignore. I hope you'll wrestle with the question, though, in whatever way works for you. This is the difference between a lecture and a sermon. I actually count it as a win if I say something that sends you down a rabbit hole of your own thought. This is one of these questions, whose are we, that has as many answers as there are people. Whatever answer you find in your heart is the right answer for you, for now. I found in my heart 3 different interrelated answers. The first I've already offered in the children's story and in the poem I shared as the meditation. Whose are we? We belong to the universe. I find I don't need there to be any supernatural forces because the natural world inspires such deep feelings of awe and wonder. When I contemplate things like the unlikely odds that life exists in the first place, never mind that my particular life and genetic material should be given to me as a gift, it shakes me to the core. When I think about my place in the universe, I recognize that I'm on the one hand inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, and on the other, an essential part of all that is. If I were suddenly to cease to exist, say Descartes offers me a drink and I say, I think not, and poof. There would be a rip in the time-space continuum. And I've watched enough Star Trek to know that that would be a very, very bad thing. The knowledge that the materials that make me up have cycled through innumerable other manifestations, as well as the awareness that this body will someday break down and become part of an unknown future, those things grant me a sense of permeability. I'm made of star stuff, and someday the atoms that make me up may be part of a star again. It's an odd sort of immortality, but it reassures me somehow anyway. So that's my first answer. We belong to the universe. With each of my answers, I'm going to invite you into a little mini meditation, just a couple breaths. Try it on for size. I'll introduce it with a poem or a reading. I'll close it with a song. So this poem is Where Does the Temple Begin? Where Does It End? By Mary Oliver. There are things you can't reach, but you can reach out to them, and all day long. The wind, the bird flying away, the idea of God. And it can keep you as busy as anything else, and happier. The snake slides away, the fish jumps like a little lily out of the water and back in. The goldfinches sing from the unreachable top of the tree. I look. Morning to night, I am never done with looking. Looking, I mean not just standing around, but standing around as though with your arms open and thinking maybe something will come, some shining coil of wind or a few leaves from any old tree. They are all in this too. And now I will tell you the truth. Everything in the world comes, at least closer and cordially, like the nibbling tinsel-eyed fish, the unlooping snake, like goldfinches, little dolls of gold fluttering around the corner of the sky. Corner of the sky of God, the blue air. So take just a few breaths and let yourselves belong to the universe.
They said you couldn't take a day off. How much would you be willing to give of your salary to take that day? Like that's the thing I always ask people. If you're willing to not come in, what are you willing to put up there, or what are you willing to give back rather to take that day to prove a point?
I get that. Especially
$200K worth it? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I didn't think of it that way. You sound like that's something you ever did.
You kidding me? Are you serious?
Sure. I'm not sure.
I value. Listen. I value the hits I take to.
I will be gentle with myself. I will love myself. I am a child of the universe, being born each moment. I will be gentle with myself. I will love myself. I am a child of the universe, being born each moment. I will be gentle with myself. I will love myself. I am a child of the universe, being born each moment. I will be gentle with myself. I will love myself. I am a child of the universe, being born each moment.
And some sort of like dehydrated, semi-conscious.
The second answer that works for me is that I am yours and you are mine. We belong to one another. We are bound in community. The culture is trying to convince us that we don't need each other, that instead we need things. We need to buy things, we need to consume things, we need to distract ourselves with entertainment and devices and other addictions, and that is a lie. Human beings didn't evolve to exist in isolation. We're tribal omnivores. It's what we are biologically, which means that today's trends toward greater and greater loneliness, they have huge implications for our spiritual, emotional, and physical health. When we lean into our need for one another, we become stronger and more joyful. We become more whole. Not that community is always easy. Quite the contrary, it's messy and challenging. All those competing needs, all those clashing cultures. We need to bring a lot of grace to our relationships and our communities. There needs to be plenty of room for mistakes and frustrations, apologies and forgiveness. We have to make peace over and over again with the fact that each of us has control over exactly one person's behavior, our own. Once when I was facilitating a training, I was offered home hospitality with a person who worked as a director of religious education and her husband, who was a physician. Their house was amazing. I'd never been there before. I'd never met them before. And everything I needed to find was in the first place I looked. It was so well organized. When I asked them about it, they explained that they both worked with people and they found people to be very messy. And so they organized and reorganized their house over and over again as a form of fun and therapy. They said, our home environment we can control, the physician said. My patients, not so much. The idea that we can control or even influence other people's behavior feeds into codependence. This dynamic is most clear in relationships where one or both people are struggling with addiction, but it can show up in any situation where we try to assume responsibility for someone else's feelings or behaviors. How many of us identify as people pleasers? Caretakers, rescuers. The difference between a dependent, codependent relationship and healthy reciprocity is good boundaries. We can and should listen to and support one another, but if someone's unhappy, if I change who I am to try to please them, I lose integrity and I disempower them. When I'm able to say I can go this far but no further, and I can tolerate this much but no more, that leaves the other person space so that they can do their internal work, which is going to work much better in the end than my trying to do it for them. To be present with someone, to keep an open heart without trying to fix or give advice or solve their problems can be uncomfortable. I sometimes joke that, the world really would be a better place if they would put me in charge. Well, maybe it would. But it wouldn't be right, and it wouldn't be real. Healthy, reciprocal relationships, interdependence, that allows what you say and feel to matter to me. I'm changed and transformed by my relationships, but I'm neither coerced nor coercive. Interdependence looks like a network of autonomous beings, each growing and learning, influenced but not controlled by the other nodes in the network. We're responsible for ourselves, for our own choices, and we are accountable to one another and to future generations. We belong to this task, building the commonwealth of humanity, a world with peace and justice for all, a place where every child grows up safe and loved, and every adult is able to reach their full potential. To lead us into a second moment of meditation, these are the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from the letter from Birmingham jail. He writes, in a real sense, all life is interrelated. All people are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. So I invite you now to take another few breaths
That's great. And then also, Latavius,
and let yourself belong to the commonwealth of humanity, to the inescapable network of mutuality. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. So whose are we? My third answer is the hardest for me to put into words. There's something in me that calls me forward into my own process of growth and becoming, which is somehow a part of the collective evolution of not just our species, but all creation. Intellectually, the closest match for understanding this something that I feel is the definition of God offered by process theology. It's been a while since I preached on process theology. I can't hope to do it justice in the time we have left this morning, so here's the briefest of brief summaries. Process theology begins with the assertion that the universe exists. Then you ask yourself, what is the universe made of? Process theology proposes a universe made up of something called actual entities. If you break matter up into the smallest possible particle, and then you look at it in an infinitely brief moment of time, you have an actual entity. All actual entities have the capacity to choose. We exist as part of a universe of free choosers, and the actual entities that make up the systems or societies or organisms choose to work together in a specific way, and that's what makes people and stars and solar systems, and that's what creates the universe as it is. Now, all of the actual entities and systems and societies and organisms are in relationship. Everything has an effect on everything else. That effect might be negligible or it might be profound, but we are all connected, interdependent. And in the process universe, God is a word for an actual entity, remember that infinitely small thing in an infinitely brief moment of time, that is supreme in seeing and comprehending the complexity of all that is, and supreme in imagining possible outcomes. So God is the force that keeps pulling the universe forward, pulling it toward life and love and peace and connection and wholeness, keeping it from descending into entropy, stagnation, and collapse. So, process theology is written by a particle physicist, and it's pretty intellectual and intense, but this is the framework that works best for me. It fits my lived experience, but it's the lived experience that I really want to talk about because I feel it. I feel it here in my chest. There's something that knows who I am. There's something that knows who I am becoming. And I could name it God, or I could name it my sense of call. I could call it intuition or true self, the still small voice. I could call it Buddha nature or Christ nature, but I know this about it. Its motivation is love and compassion and integrity. It doesn't really matter how I name it. For me, it is real and true, and above all, it's trustworthy. Sometimes it wants me to do things that I am afraid of, so I argue with it. But when I listen to it and follow its lead, my life unfolds in ways that feel right and good. When I surrender, and oh boy, is surrendering hard for me. Oh boy. I feel connected. I feel held, and I feel pulled forward by something greater than me, greater even than the universe or the beloved community, something that encompasses all of that, but is somehow more than the sum of its parts. Is there a greater source, a creative spirit, a force that undergirds us and lures us toward greater good? To say yes or no definitively would be to board up a deep well that has nourished humankind for thousands of years. So perhaps we can just leave the question open and say, whose are we? We belong to the mystery. This is Of Being by Denise Levertov. I know this happiness is provisional. The looming presences, great suffering, great fear, withdraw only into peripheral vision. But ineluctable, this shimmering of wind in the blue leaves, this flood of stillness widening the lake of the sky, this need to dance, this need to kneel, this mystery. Let's take another few breaths and rest in that mystery. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there.